Julie Kelly joins us now. She is the author of Declassified by Julie Kelly, the excellent Substack, and the book January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, good to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince, thanks for having me on.
All right, so the D.C., the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia steps out and pretty much as expected says, nope, Trump is not entitled to immunity. What do you take away from this?
Right. So this is what we expected. We could tell from oral arguments, which took place on January 9th, that all three of these judges, two appointed by Joe Biden, one, by the way, another one, Karen Henderson, who has been on the court for 34 years, appointed by the first President Bush. You could tell from oral arguments, they were really giving Trump's lawyer a hard time. You know, this was sort of a pro forma. They were going to uphold Judge Tanya Chutkan's historic ruling from December, that also concluded that a president can indeed face criminal prosecution. This is all historic, right? This is all groundbreaking. None of this has ever been vetted or considered before. But yet these judges write as if this is a no-brainer, right? They don't even admit today, Vince, in this ruling, in this order, that this is extremely complicated, you know, that this is a historic exercise here. They want to be very cautious and deliberate.
Yes.
You know, they turned around with in 27 days and issued this order under pressure from many in the media, by the way. And this is the direction the country is headed. And these are the people, as you and I have talked, these judges responsible for a very consequential trajectory our country is now going on.
Huge. Okay, so I listened to the oral arguments that day. I thought Donald Trump's lawyer ran circles around the judges and everybody involved. He was saying, look, the Constitution has an answer to this. If you really think that the president is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, if he dispatches SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponent, as one of the judges suggested in a hypothetical, then it is the obligation of Congress to impeach and convict the president of the United States for that. And then subsequently, he can be criminally charged if he's convicted by the Senate based on the Constitution of the United States. I thought he did an excellent job of making his case. These judges seem to have summarily dismissed that completely out of hand, and then simultaneously write in their opinion today that Trump's argument before the court is that he is completely unaccountable as president of the United States. That was not his argument. The argument was that there's a proper way to handle that, and it's through Congress.
Right, and they dismissed that argument. It's basically the impeachment clause and then also representing double jeopardy because, of course, he was impeached. And he was not convicted by the Senate, so it's basically you go to trial in Congress, and he was essentially acquitted by the Senate. That is what we as Americans have pretty much assumed, that was the way that you were supposed to, high crimes and misdemeanors of a president. Now, what was a little schizophrenic about their ruling, and I'm still going through it, is they refer to him as Citizen Trump. Well, the allegations in Jack Smith's 4-count indictment, by the way, and this is not a murder indictment. He's not accused of taking bribes from Chinese officials. He didn't kill anyone. You know, he's not running drugs. These are very, very vague counts that Jack Smith is using, 2 of which, by the way, are already at the Supreme Court and could be reversed by the Supreme Court, how DOJ has been interpreting them. That's a whole other issue. But these are not specific crimes. And so, but they are, he is accused of committing these crimes while in office. So how can these judges come back and say, well, now you're Citizen Trump, so you don't get presidential immunity? Well, that wasn't even the argument, and that's not even what Jack Smith is accusing him of. So it really is very confusing, very weak. You would think if judges are going to come forward, especially 2 judges who have only been on the appellate court, one for about a year and a half, another one for less than a year, are going to come back with some serious arguments, some weighty arguments, but they did not. This really fell so short.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's funny. So Hillary Clinton can go for years and, use the resources of her party apparatus to allege lies about Donald Trump and then subsequently claim that the election was stolen from her by the Russians and maintain that in perpetuity. never be charged for anything related to that. Donald Trump, in his official capacity as president of the United States, objects to how an election was conducted through court filings and through political rallies, which have historically always been protected First Amendment speech. And he's being charged by Jack Smith. And now the courts that are considering it are pretending like all of this happened while he was not president of the United States in order to maintain a prosecution of him.
Right, and there was one passage, and I tweeted this out, something about if these allegations, if true, represent an unprecedented attack on the structure of government. It's just a ludicrous thing to say. It's so sophomoric because, to your point, we could point to so many other recent examples, not the least of which is Russiagate and FISAgate, using all the levers of government power to investigate a presidential campaign and then set up a sitting president, trying to throw him out on phony charges, using the most powerful government agencies, including a secret court, to do that. So the idea that Donald Trump meeting with John Eastman and some other people to figure out what Mike Pence might be able to do on January 6th, that this is so beyond the pale, that this is such a no-brainer, this is such a clear cut of presidential criminality, that no one should even dispute this for a moment. I really think the arrogance of this ruling, what I found the most offensive, that they seriously did not understand or appreciate the gravity of what they are deciding, and simply acting as political actors, which of course we know one of them, Florence Pan, married to a well-known Democratic activist in Washington, D.C. We certainly know that that's her motivation. So very disappointing. And, so now the question is, what happens next? What is the timeline next?
Yes.
That's what people really want to know.
So what's the answer to that? I see that this comes down to whether or not there will be an appeal to the Supreme Court.
Right. So this was another political maneuver that the 3-judge panel did. And they said, all right, well, we're issuing this. It's going to be on hold, a stay, they call it, until February 12th. Donald Trump only has until February 12th to file an emergency stay with the Supreme Court, pending what, of course, will be his application to get the Supreme Court involved.
So his lawyers have 6 days to consider every element of what the court said today, and then offer their rebuttal.
Right. Well, not really. They have to file an emergency stay, which will mean they file the emergency stay by Monday, and then the Supreme Court can say, yes, we're going to keep this on hold, basically not kick it back to Judge Chutkan, which will then, restart the January 6th trial. We're going to put it on hold. So the Supreme Court has a few different things that they could do, but think about this timeline that these 3 judges gave Donald Trump. Where Donald Trump's lawyers going to be on Thursday? They're going to be at the Supreme Court defending him against what happened in Colorado, trying to kick him off the ballot.
Yes.
So they know that they're compressing. Of course, this has already been a compressed time. The appellate court already issued an expedited calendar. So they had to, file these rush briefs. They had these rushed oral arguments within less than a month after Judge Chutkan issued her ruling. So all of this has happened quick. Why? Because they want to put Donald Trump on trial before the election. Everyone in Washington, Democrat and Republican judges, understand this is a political motivation, and for the most part, all of them are going along with them. So now it really is in the hands of the Supreme Court. What will they do? Will they issue an indefinite stay and wait? Technically, Trump will have 90 days. That's the typical timeline to apply for cert, and have the Supreme Court says, yes, we will grant cert, which means we will hear your case. So it depends on what the Supreme Court does. If they turn around next week and say, okay, yes, we're going to have this stay basically on the proceedings, but you have to file your brief with us in 10 days, then they will be part of this rushed schedule. And it's very likely that they could do that. I don't know.
There's something, the United States Department of Justice, on a separate issue, but all related, they have this policy that they call the 60-day rule. They're supposed to delay public actions in the lead up to an election for fear of influencing the outcome of an election through prosecutorial conduct, right? So Have you heard anything from the Justice Department that says that they'd be willing to tap the brakes on prosecuting Trump if it gets close to the election? Have they once said anything like that?
No, Attorney General Merrick Garland, in an interview about a week or so ago, said the exact opposite. He said, this is out of our hands. We filed the indictments in 2023, one in June, one in August. Now it is in the courts, both courts, Judge Cannon in Florida, Judge Chuck in Washington, D.C. It is in their hands. It is up to them how to proceed with the trial. We have nothing to do with it. So he very clearly distanced himself from any, again, what we've always understood, DOJ policy.
But that would be a lie, though, right? But that would be a lie, though, because can't the Justice Department petition the court to consider the policy and say, hey, look, we'd like to delay any further action on this?
I mean, I guess they could, but they won't.
No, they won't.
I mean, you and I have talked about this. This Department of Justice, this special counsel's office, they are not abiding by any traditions, any norms, as they like to call it, that the Department of Justice has tried to adhere to. Of course, they've violated that as well in recent years, related to presidential elections. They've openly interfered, and now they have indicated that they have no problem with Donald Trump being on trial September, October of 2024. In fact, there are timelines going around right now on social media that kind of game out what the Supreme Court could do next, what the potential timelines could be, and how this really could go all the way to a September or October start of the trial. And that is something that Merrick Garland has said, it's out of our hands if that's what happens. And Judge Chutkan makes it clear. Of course, we know she wants to be in charge of this. She has helped perpetuate this as much as she can by also setting this rushed trial schedule. So, of course, she's going to. She's going to say, and she has said, politics in the campaign, the presidential election, that has no consideration in my courtroom. She's made that perfectly clear over and over. She will say that again.
How critical is convicting Trump to Joe Biden's reelection chances?
I mean, I don't know. I'm sensing in some quarters they're realizing how this could backfire. And it certainly could not just backfire for Joe Biden and his reelection chances, but all of the Democrats who are up, Democrat senators, House members, in red state senators or swing districts, how these voters are going to respond to having Joe Biden's DOJ have Donald Trump on trial as people are voting, and what these Democrats are going to say, because they probably will get an earful from their constituents like, hey, look, what, especially given the charges in Washington, D.C., these big charges. So I'm not really sure. I mean, if you watch Joe Biden and how he talks about Trump, he's not thinking of any political calculations, I think, even for himself. He has such hatred and contempt for him. I don't think it matters how it may or may not affect his reelection chances. He wants Donald Trump, who he threatens to beat up regularly, including recently again at a fundraiser. He wants him in jail.
Yeah, definitely. But I do see they keep looking at these surveys, or at least they keep putting them all over the corporate press, that if Trump were to be convicted, that some meaningful percentage of voters would second guess their support for him. And I do think that even if Biden's not contemplating that, there are definitely people around him who very much think that this is an excellent way to meddle in the election.
Yes, that's true. And I'm sure that there is a segment of voters who, all right, well, he's a convicted felon.
Right.
No, I'm not going to vote for him for president. But also that will really, as you know, fire up his base at the same time. So what will counterbalance that?
Yes.
And will it? There's so many unknowns, and today was another example of that. And then these wrinkles of the compressed time pushing the Supreme Court to handle this more quickly than they normally would. It's just really hard to sort of game out, where this is headed, or some political consequences.
And the timeline just keeps on moving so quickly. I mean, because as you mentioned, later this week, the ballot interference, the ballot rigging case is set to be argued before the United States Supreme Court. So that's a big deal, and that's ahead. We'll keep talking to you, Julie Kelly, about all of it. Thank you very much for your aggressive coverage. Always appreciate talking to you.